My husband died 3 years ago. Or, at least, that's what the death certificate said. I still remember the exact moment I clicked purchase on those plane tickets. The soft blue glow of my laptop screen lit up the dark kitchen. The clock read 2:04 a.m., and my heart was pounding so hard I thought it might shatter my ribs. 2 tickets, one for me, one for Liam, my 8-year-old son, a round trip to San Diego. Just us. I didn't cry. I didn't smile either. I just sat there, frozen, my fingers trembling slightly above the touchpad. It wasn't a vacation I was buying. It was a promise to myself, that we would breathe again, that I would try. That night, the house was dead quiet. Even the creak of the old kitchen chair sounded like thunder. Denver winters tend to swallow sound. Even memories seem quieter here. And for 3 years, I lived in that silence, wore it like a second skin. The only thing louder than the silence was the guilt, the kind that whispers at night when your child asks, "Mom, do you think Daddy can see me from the sky?" 3 years ago, my husband, Andrew Harris, died in a snowmobile accident in Idaho. That's what they told me. No body, no goodbyes, just a call from one of his colleagues, voice shaking as he said, "He's gone. I'm so sorry." I remember collapsing to the floor, clutching Liam in my arms. My knees went out like someone had taken a bat to them. The whole world broke in that one breath. After that, life didn't pause. It moved on, fast. I had a mortgage to cover, sold my wedding ring to buy time, took a full-time job at a local credit union. I became the kind of woman who wakes up at 5 a.m. and eats cereal standing up because sitting felt too vulnerable, who smiles at coworkers but never quite lets anyone in, who convinces herself every single day, "You are strong. You have to be." Because what choice did I have? I had Liam, my little boy with those deep brown eyes that carried both curiosity and grief far too big for his age. He didn't cry much. Kids don't always know how to grieve. But sometimes at night, I'd find him curled up holding that tiny Polaroid of us on the beach, the last vacation we ever took as a family. That photo sat in the front sleeve of his wallet. Yes, Liam has a wallet. He started carrying it last year like a little man. And in that wallet, the photo, a few crumpled dollars, and a note I once wrote him when he had a fever. "You are braver than you believe." That photo became our symbol of what was stolen. The world doesn't stop for grief. And in this country, being a single mom isn't just hard. It's treated like a scarlet letter. At work, they'd praise my resilience, but pass me over for every promotion. "You've got a lot on your plate." Megan, at Liam's school, Dad's offered to help out with things in a tone that made my skin crawl. And when I went to refinance the house, the banker looked me up and down and said, "You're sure you don't have a cosigner?" No, I didn't. Because the man I loved more than anything in this world had left me, vanished, dead, or so I thought. That's why buying those tickets meant something. It wasn't just a break. It was a breath, a defiant whisper to the universe, "I'm not done." When I told Liam, his entire face lit up. San Diego, he beamed. Like, the beach. He ran around the living room, dragging his little suitcase from under the stairs, already packing sunscreen and swim trunks. "You're going to smile more there, right, Mom?" He asked it quietly, but it hit me like a brick. I crouched down, kissed his forehead, and said, "I'll try, honey. I'll really try." That night, after he fell asleep, I stood by the window watching the city lights flicker. Denver is beautiful in a quiet kind of way, but I realized I hadn't seen it in years. I had been surviving, not living. I didn't know the next morning would change everything. The day of our flight, Liam was bouncing around like it was Christmas. "San Diego, here we come," he yelled, dragging his tiny suitcase over the hardwood floors. I couldn't help but smile. Maybe this would be good for us. Maybe the ocean would rinse away some of the pain. We got through security. Liam held my hand the whole time. That grip, half excitement, half fear, reminded me of the day he was born. He clung to me then too, like I was the only steady thing in a world full of noise. We boarded the plane, took our seats, window side, like he wanted. I was just settling in, pulling out a paperback I hadn't touched in months, when Liam tugged my sleeve. "Mom," he whispered, "is that Dad?" I turned, slowly, 2 rows ahead, across the aisle. A man was leaning sideways in his seat, laughing softly with a young blonde woman. He wore a wide-brimmed hat, sunglasses, and a short-sleeved shirt that revealed just enough of his neck. And there it was, the scar. A tiny crescent under the jaw, barely visible. Unless you knew it was there, unless you'd kissed it 100 times. My mouth went dry. I stared so long I forgot to blink. "Sweetheart," I finally managed. "That's just someone who looks like him." But I didn't believe myself, and neither did Liam. The man shifted again. His fingers tapped the armrest rhythmically, just like Andrew used to when he was thinking. My breath caught in my throat. Every nerve in my body screamed, it couldn't be, it shouldn't be. Because if that man was Andrew Harris, then I had buried a lie, and my entire life for the past 3 years had been built on sand. The plane started taxiing. Liam pressed his forehead against the window. Quiet now. I sat frozen, knuckles white around the seatbelt. I didn't know what to say, what to believe. All I knew was, if that man turned around, if I saw his eyes, I'd know. I'd know if the ghost I'd been grieving was never a ghost at all. But he didn't turn around, and I couldn't bring myself to move. As the wheels lifted off the ground, all I could think was, what if it really is him? And then right before the seatbelt sign dinged off, he turned. Slowly, casually, and he smiled, directly at me. The moment he smiled, something inside me cracked. It wasn't just recognition, it was betrayal echoing through every cell in my body. I sat frozen, the roar of the engine fading beneath the thudding in my ears. That smile, it wasn't one of acknowledgement or warmth. It was casual, offhanded, like a man glancing at a stranger across the aisle. And yet, my stomach twisted, because my body remembered what my mind refused to accept. He didn't see me, not really, or maybe he did, and that was worse. Liam leaned into me. "Mom, that was him. I know it." I didn't answer. Couldn't. My throat had closed up like a fist. I looked away, staring out the window, letting the California sunlight scatter across the clouds, trying to steady my breath. But my mind wouldn't stop. What kind of man fakes his death, disappears for 3 years, and reappears on a flight to San Diego with another woman? The rest of the flight was a blur. I tried to read, to close my eyes, to do anything but look 2 rows ahead. But I saw him, again and again. The way he leaned in to speak to her, the way his fingers drummed the armrest, the slight tilt of his head when he laughed. It was him! It was Andrew! And just like that, every hard-earned step of healing I'd taken dissolved. By the time we landed, my palms were slick with sweat. Liam was bouncing with excitement. "Did you see the ocean?" Mom from the window, it was huge. I nodded. "Yeah, baby, I saw." I gripped his little hand tighter than I needed to as we walked off the plane. The man Andrew exited first. I kept my head down, hiding behind sunglasses I didn't remember putting on. I told myself I wouldn't look. I wouldn't chase ghosts. But Liam did. He tugged my hand, whispering. He looked back. "Mom," right before the door. I turned, just a fraction, and caught the tail end of Andrew's stride, disappearing into the crowd with that blonde woman beside him. She was laughing at something he said. He never used to make me laugh like that near the end. The hotel room had a small balcony overlooking the ocean. Liam threw himself on the bed, bouncing and giggling. I stood at the sliding glass door, watching waves roll in. I wanted to scream. Instead, I stared. That man, that ghost, was here, somewhere in this same city, living, breathing, lying. I should have been angry, furious, ready to call the police, the press, anyone. But what I felt most was something far more dangerous. Hope. What if he had a reason? What if something had gone terribly wrong? What if everything I thought I knew wasn't the whole story? That night, Liam drifted off quickly, worn out from travel. I sat outside on the balcony, wrapped in a light cardigan, listening to the hum of the city below. And then I heard it. A voice, faint, carried up from the balcony just below ours. Do you ever care about anything besides money?
It was sharp, female, young.
And then a pause. Then his voice. Don't start with me, Chloe. I told you what this weekend was about. Chloe. Her name was Chloe. I felt like someone had punched the air from my lungs. I inched forward, slowly, crouching just enough to peer over the edge without being seen. There he was. No hat, no sunglasses, no mistaking him now. Andrew Harris, my dead husband, standing one floor below me, in shorts and a gray t-shirt, gesturing angrily, pacing the tiny balcony. He looked older, thinner, a bit more weathered, but still unmistakably Andrew. Chloe sat in a lounge chair, arms crossed, shaking her head. You think dragging me to some budget hotel makes up for ghosting me for 2 weeks? Andrew snapped. It's a 4-star hotel, Chloe. She rolled her eyes. Wow, so romantic. I backed away from the railing, hands shaking. My chest felt tight. My knees wobbled. So it was him. Not a look-alike, not a fantasy. It was him. And he was alive. And arguing with a new girlfriend. In the hotel right beneath mine. What do you even do with that? I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to Liam's soft breathing, the low rumble of late-night traffic, the steady heartbeat of a city that didn't care. My world had just cracked open. Images looped in my mind. Andrew holding Liam as a baby. Andrew texting me, running late again. Andrew's coffin, empty. The urn I buried, also empty. My entire marriage, empty. The next morning, I poured Liam a bowl of cereal from the complimentary breakfast kit and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the tiny hotel coffee machine. What do you do when the dead walk back into your life? Pretend you didn't see them. Report them. Or confront them. Liam was building a Lego shark on the floor, humming to himself. The sun was pouring in, golden and soft. I looked at my son, at the small wallet resting on the bedside table, the corner of our old family photo poking out. And I made a decision. That night, I was going to face him. Face the man who left me in the ashes of a lie. The man who let his son grieve him. The man who built a new life. One balcony beneath mine. But I wouldn't go as the wife, or the mother, or the woman broken by grief. I would go as Megan Harris, the woman who survived him, the woman who earned her own name back. That evening, once Liam was asleep, I tied my hair back, slipped on my flats, and grabbed the hotel key card. My palms were sweaty, my chest tight, my stomach twisted into knots. I walked down the hall, past the elevator, past the vending machines, and then I stepped into the bar. Low lighting, jazz playing in the corner, a few couples at tables, murmuring over cocktails. And there he was, sitting at the far end of the bar, alone. one hand wrapped around a glass, the other tracing invisible lines on the counter. His shoulders hunched, like he carried more than guilt. Maybe regret. Maybe not. My breath caught. My feet moved. I didn't know what I was going to say. I didn't know if I'd scream, cry, or collapse. But I knew one thing. He was going to look me in the eye. He didn't recognize me at first. I took the seat 2 stools down, keeping a careful distance. I didn't want to make a scene, not yet. My heart was hammering so loudly I could barely hear the jazz trio in the corner. The bartender raised an eyebrow at me. I lifted a hand, signaling for water. My throat was dry, my palms clammy. Andrew looked tired, not broken, not burdened, just tired. Like a man who'd spent years outrunning something and was starting to realize it had followed him anyway. He swirled the amber liquid in his glass slowly, eyes distant. I forced my voice low and even. Rough night. He glanced over, startled. For half a second, confusion flickered. Then came the polite half-smile, automatic, almost apologetic. You could say that. That voice, it hadn't changed. It still pulled something raw and involuntary from deep in my chest. I hated it. I took a sip of my water. Girlfriend troubles. He let out a short, bitter laugh. Something like that. You want to talk about it? I asked, keeping my eyes down, fingers tight around the glass. I needed this to feel casual, normal, like 2 strangers passing in the night. He didn't look at me again, just stared into his drink. She doesn't really get me. Thinks I'm trying to play young again. Too old for road trips. Too old for dreams. I tilted my head. Are you? He shrugged. Maybe. But I've been through hell and back. All I want is a chance to start over. His voice cracked a little at the edges. To feel like I matter again. I swallowed hard. He had no idea who he was talking to. No idea that the woman sitting 2 stools away was the one who held his hand when Liam was born. The one who signed the death certificate with shaking fingers and a hollowed heart. The one who buried an empty urn for a man who was still alive. He sighed again, rubbing his face with one hand. Sorry, you don't want to hear all this. I'm a good listener, I said softly. He turned to me then, and really looked. His gaze searched my face. Confusion narrowed his eyes. I saw the exact second it clicked. The blood drained from his face. Megan. I didn't flinch. I met his eyes and let the silence between us answer everything. He dropped his glass. It didn't shatter, but the ice cubes scattered across the bar. The bartender turned, alarmed, but I waved him off. Andrew's mouth opened and closed. I thought you were widowed, I offered. Yeah, me too. He looked like he might vomit. I didn't know you were what are you doing here? I smiled, and it felt like steel cutting through paper. Vacation. San Diego's lovely this time of year. He stood abruptly, swaying. I need to explain. You think I snapped, finally letting the heat rise in my voice. You let me think you were dead, Andrew. You let your son believe you drowned in a river. And now, I find you sipping whiskey in a beachside hotel with a woman named Chloe. He flinched like I'd slapped him. It's not what you think. I stood too, stepping closer. My voice dropped to a whisper, deadly calm. You have 30 seconds to tell me why I buried an empty urn and spent the last 3 years raising your son alone. He sat back down hard, head in his hands. His fingers shook. It was the startup, he murmured. The investment deal I told you about. It went south, way south. I took money from people I shouldn't have. When I couldn't repay it, they threatened me. You, Liam. I folded my arms. So your grand plan was to fake your death. I didn't see another way, he whispered. I was in over my head. I thought disappearing would protect you. You thought abandoning your family without a word was noble. I paid it all back, he said quickly. Every cent. I've spent the last 3 years trying to rebuild. Quietly, safely. My hands clenched. You didn't even check if we were okay. Liam cried himself to sleep for months. I had to tell a 5-year-old that his daddy was never coming home. He blinked rapidly, his voice trembling. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Megan. I hated myself every day. I leaned in, so close he could smell the salt in my skin. You don't get to hate yourself. You left that luxury behind with your wedding ring. His face crumpled. Please, let me talk to him. Let me talk to Liam. I stepped back. Tomorrow, 11 a.m., Hotel Cafe. You'll have 5 minutes, that's all. He nodded slowly, eyes glassy. Thank you. But I wasn't done. I turned before walking away. You don't get to come back from the dead and act like you can just be a dad again. As I walked out of the bar, I felt my legs tremble, but I didn't stop. The doors closed behind me with a satisfying click, like punctuation, a full stop. Outside, the night was cool. A breeze tugged at the hem of my shirt. I walked slowly, back to the elevator, pressed the button, waited. And then, a scream. A woman's voice, shouting on the beach. I turned. Down below, near the shoreline, I saw a figure collapse. Another figure dropped to their knees beside him. Chloe. And the man, Andrew, flat on his side, unmoving. People were running, shouting. Someone yelled for help. I froze. My mind screamed, "Don't you dare!" But my feet moved anyway. I ran. Across the sand, past stunned tourists holding melting cones and spilled drinks. My sandals flew off behind me. My breath came short and fast. But I didn't stop. Because Andrew, that man, was lying there motionless in the sun, face pale, one arm twisted awkwardly underneath him. Chloe was kneeling beside him, her voice cracking as she screamed his name. Andrew, wake up, Andrew. Somewhere in my head, I heard my own voice whisper, let him stay down. But I didn't listen, because Liam was watching. I glanced back and saw my son standing at a distance, clutching his little sand shovel, frozen in place, eyes wide, mouth trembling. He didn't say it, but I knew what he was thinking, Mom. Is that my dad again? I dropped to my knees beside Andrew, my knees sinking into the hot sand. He's breathing, I murmured to myself, pressing 2 fingers to his neck. Weak pulse, might be heat stroke, dehydration. Chloe was crying now, mascara streaking her cheeks. What do we do? What do I do? Get help, I snapped. Run to the hotel. Tell them someone's collapsed on the beach. She stared at me, blinking. Now. She scrambled up and sprinted toward the boardwalk, yelling for help. I shaded Andrew's face with my towel, trying to remember everything I'd learned in that workplace CPR course years ago. His skin was clammy, his lips dry, his breathing shallow. But there, I looked down at him, this man I hated and loved and couldn't make sense of. This man who had disappeared from my life like a ghost, only to drop right back into it like a bomb. This man who had left me to raise our son alone. And yet, I stayed. I stayed because some twisted part of me couldn't watch him die twice. He stirred beneath my hands. A weak groan left his lips. Then, Megan. His eyes fluttered open, clouded, disoriented, but focused on me. I froze, then nodded slowly. Yeah, I said, my voice barely audible over the crash of waves. It's me. His brows furrowed, his lips moving as if to speak again. But nothing came out, just a dry rasp, a whimper. I heard footsteps behind me. A hotel employee knelt beside us with a first aid kit. He began checking vitals, asking questions. I stepped back, wiping the sand from my hands, watching Chloe return hovering, pale, wide-eyed. And then Andrew turned his head again. His eyes didn't leave mine. "Megan," he croaked, "please, we need to talk." I stood slowly, brushing sand from my legs. My heart pounded not from running, but from everything that wasn't being said. "Not here," I replied. "Tonight, 10 o'clock, hotel bar." He nodded, barely, before slumping against the staff member's shoulder. I walked back toward Liam, who had abandoned his sandcastle and now stood ankle-deep in water, his hands shaking slightly at his sides. He looked up at me, his voice small. "Mom, is that really Dad?" I crouched down beside him, brushing damp hair from his forehead. "We'll talk about it soon, sweetheart," I said gently, "but for now, let's just go inside." The afternoon passed in a haze. Liam dozed off on the hotel bed, a half-eaten cookie in his hand, his face flushed from sun and confusion. I sat at the desk, hands trembling, pen hovering over a blank page. I didn't know why I started writing, only that I had to. It wasn't a letter for Andrew. It was for me, for the woman I used to be 3 years ago, the one who fell to the floor when she got that phone call, the one who sold her wedding ring and ate cereal standing up in the dark, the one who told her son every day, "You are safe, you are loved," while hiding her own breaking heart. "Dear Megan, you don't know it yet, but you will survive this. Not because you're unbreakable, but because you learn to breathe underwater. You'll think you've lost everything, but what you've really lost is permission to keep living someone else's lie. He left you, but you didn't leave yourself." When I finished, I folded the letter in half and slid it into my journal. No return address, no signature, just a promise that whatever happened tonight, I wouldn't forget who I had become without him. At exactly 9:58 p.m., I walked into the bar. This time, I didn't hide. No sunglasses, no hesitation. Andrew was already there, sitting at the same stool, shoulders straighter this time, eyes tracking the door like he'd been rehearsing this moment. When he saw me, he stood. He looked older, the silver at his temples more visible under the bar lighting, the lines around his eyes deeper, but not from grief. From guilt. "Megan," he said, like it hurt, like it was holy. I didn't smile, didn't soften. I just nodded and took the seat beside him. "You have 2 minutes?" I said. He sat slowly, running a hand through his hair. "I didn't want it to be like this," he began. "I swear." "Then tell me how it happened," I replied, voice low and even. "From the beginning." He took a breath, as if bracing for impact. "You remember the startup I was working on," he said. "I'd borrowed more than I could afford to lose. Got tangled with people who don't forgive failure. When things fell apart, they didn't just threaten me, they threatened you. And Liam." I stared, unmoved. "So you chose to vanish, to let us bury you, mourn you." "I thought it was the only way," he whispered. "I didn't know how to fix it. So I staged the accident, paid someone off to falsify the report. I left everything, my name, my life, you." I closed my eyes, letting the words wash over me. He didn't justify it. He didn't beg. He just laid it down. And when I opened my eyes, I said, "You let your son believe you were dead. You made me lie to him. You broke us." He nodded, silent, his eyes wet. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said, "but I want to be in his life again, whatever it takes, however long. I just want to try." My hands tightened around my glass. "You don't get to decide when you come back," I said. "You don't get to ask for a family after choosing to leave one behind." He didn't argue, just nodded. I'm not asking you to take me back, he said quietly. I know I lost that right. But please, let me be his dad. I stood, slowly, my voice steady, sharp. Tomorrow, 11, Hotel Cafe. You'll talk to him. You'll tell him the truth, and then we'll see. He exhaled, a breath that sounded like relief and fear. I turned and walked away, not looking back. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally knew the truth. And it didn't feel like closure. It felt like the beginning of another storm. The next morning, I woke before the alarm. Liam was still asleep, arms flung over his pillow, hair tousled like he'd wrestled the night. I watched him for a moment, listening to the sound of his breath, the steady rhythm that had kept me sane for the last 3 years. How do you prepare an 8-year-old to see the father he thought was dead? You don't. You just walk beside him and pray the ground doesn't fall out beneath his feet. Pancakes, he mumbled suddenly, eyes still closed. I smiled faintly. Yeah, sweetheart, they've got pancakes. By the time we reached the Hotel Cafe, Andrew was already there, sitting at a corner table, nervously drumming his fingers on the menu. No sunglasses this time, no hat, just a man with a storm in his chest and nowhere left to run. Liam froze when he saw him. He didn't run, he didn't cry, he just stared. His face scrunched like he was solving a puzzle too big for his heart. Mom, he whispered, that's really him, isn't it? I nodded. Yes, honey, that's your dad. Andrew stood slowly, then dropped to one knee. Hi, buddy, he said, his voice shaking. It's me. It's Dad. Liam didn't move. His lip trembled. But you were gone. Mom said you... His words caught. His little body tensed. Andrew reached out but didn't touch him. I know. I'm so sorry, he said. I made a huge mistake. I thought I was protecting you and Mom, but I hurt you instead. There was a pause. A silence so full it pressed against the windows. Then Liam stepped forward. Not a run, not a leap. Just a small, steady walk. And he wrapped his arms around Andrew's neck. Andrew held him tight, his shoulders shaking, his eyes squeezed shut like if he let go, Liam would disappear. I turned away, blinking fast. I wasn't crying for Andrew. I was crying for Liam, for the little boy who finally got something back, even if it had sharp edges. They sat down, and Andrew ordered pancakes with extra syrup, just like Liam used to love when he was 5. The conversation was awkward at first. Liam picked at his food, asking quiet questions. Where were you? Working. Fixing big problems, Andrew said. I traveled a lot. I had to stay far away for a while, but I never stopped thinking about you. Liam frowned. Did you miss my birthday? Andrew looked like he'd been punched in the chest. I did. And I'm sorry. That was never okay. I let them talk. I didn't jump in. This wasn't mine to narrate. Then Liam reached into his little wallet, the one he carried like a badge of bravery, and pulled out a wrinkled photo. It was that photo. The 3 of us, on the beach in Santa Cruz, 2 months before everything unraveled, me in a wide sun hat, Andrew with a ridiculous grin, and Liam smiling, squinting, wild curls everywhere. I kept this, Liam said, sliding it across the table, so I wouldn't forget. Andrew stared at it like it had fangs. Then he pressed his hand over his mouth, trying not to fall apart. That's the best thing anyone's ever given me, he whispered. Liam smiled, small, but real. He leaned in. Did you still think about us? Andrew nodded. Every day. That was all it took. Liam started talking about school, soccer, the Lego shark, the sandcastle he'd almost finished yesterday. He was catching Andrew up, brick by brick, like he was rebuilding something lost. And Andrew, he listened, really listened, like every word was gold. When breakfast ended, Liam reached for Andrew's hand. "Can you come to the beach with us today?" Andrew looked at me, silent.
I hesitated.
But then I nodded. For a little while. The three of us walked down to the shore. Liam skipped ahead, chasing the surf. I stayed a few feet behind as Andrew carried a bucket and shovel, visibly unsure of where he fit in this picture. They built sandcastles together. Liam barked instructions. Andrew obeyed. They laughed when a rogue wave took down one of the towers. It was almost normal. Almost. I stood there, arms crossed, watching from a distance. Not because I didn't want to be in it, but because I needed to remember what it felt like to not need him anymore. Then Liam looked back at me, waved. "Mom, come help." So I did. We built 3 towers. One for me, one for Liam, one for Andrew. We didn't say what they meant, but we all knew. When the sun started to dip, we packed up the buckets and towels. Liam hugged Andrew tightly. "Can we see you tomorrow too?" he asked. Andrew looked at me again. "We'll see, buddy," he said, "one step at a time." On the walk back, Liam talked a mile a minute. Maybe he can come home with us. Maybe he can pick me up from school. Maybe we can all go to that pizza place again. I didn't respond right away, because I didn't know the answer. The door I had welded shut was open now, and what came through it might change everything. That evening, after Liam fell asleep, his face soft and peaceful, I sat on the balcony again. The waves were darker now, slower. The ocean didn't care what we built or broke on its shore. Andrew knocked gently on the glass. I opened the door, stepping aside. He didn't sit, just stood there, arms loose at his sides. "He's amazing," he said quietly. "You did such a good job with him." I didn't have a choice. I replied, "You were gone." He nodded. "I know. And I'll never forgive myself for that." We stood in silence. Then he turned to me. "I want to be in his life, whatever it takes. I'll call before visits. I won't drop in. I'll respect your boundaries. But please don't keep me out." I studied him, looking for the man I once married, the one I once believed in. He wasn't there, but someone else was. Someone quieter, humble, maybe still learning how to love without lies. "You can be in his life," I said finally, "but on my terms. One lie, and you're out for good." He nodded, blinking quickly. "Thank you." "And don't forget," I added, "I'm not the woman you left behind. I built a life without you. I'm proud of it." "I can see that. I don't need you." I said, "Liam doesn't need you to be perfect. He just needs you to be honest." "I will be," he promised. "Even if I don't deserve a second chance, I'll earn one." He left quietly, and I stood there, letting the wind dry the tears I didn't realize had fallen. The next morning, Liam was up before me. He stood at the window, looking out over the ocean, arms folded like a little man with too many thoughts. I watched him from the bed, the sun casting his silhouette long and thin against the curtain. "Mom," he said quietly, still facing the glass. "Yeah, baby. If Dad's gonna be around now, can he live with us again?" The question hit me like cold water to the chest. Not because it surprised me, because it didn't, but because I hadn't let myself think that far ahead. I'd built walls too high, doors too tightly shut. I'd welded my life back together with hard-earned independence. But Liam didn't care about all that. He just wanted his dad. I sat up slowly, patting the space beside me. He turned and walked over, climbing up and sitting cross-legged on the comforter. "Sweetheart," I said gently, "I know it was really special getting to see him again, and I'm glad you did. But living together again, that's something we'd all have to think about very carefully." "Why?" he asked. "You said he's trying. He said he's sorry. He is. And he was honest. That matters. But just because someone comes back doesn't mean everything goes back to the way it was. He looked down, picking at a thread on the quilt. You still don't trust him. I paused. I trust what I saw this week, I said. But trust takes time to rebuild. Baby, it doesn't happen overnight. Liam nodded slowly, then said something I'll never forget. I just don't want to have to choose. My heart cracked clean down the middle. I pulled him into my arms. You won't have to. I promise. But I wasn't so sure. But we spent our final full day in San Diego with Andrew again, this time at a quiet park near the hotel. They played catch. I sat on a bench, watching, observing. Andrew wasn't overdoing it. He didn't try to make grand gestures or buy forgiveness. He just showed up, steady, present, patient. That's what Liam needed most. Later, we sat under the shade of a tree. Liam munched on a popsicle. Andrew and I sat a few feet apart. He looked over at me. I know he wants us all under one roof, he said. I nodded. He asked this morning. Andrew exhaled. Do you? I looked at him, at the lines around his mouth, the scar under his jaw, the man I'd once married and buried. I don't know, I said honestly. I'm not the same woman I was. You're not the same man. We'd be starting from scratch. That's not a step I take lightly. He didn't argue, didn't plead. Then let's not force anything, he said. I'll be where he needs me to be, as often as I'm allowed. That was the right answer. And it mattered. But I still felt like the floor under me was shifting. That evening, I took a walk by myself. Just me, no Liam, no Andrew. Just the sand, and the waves, and the sea breeze tugging at my sleeves. I brought the letter with me, the one I'd written to myself, folded it neatly, weighed it in my palm. Then I buried it under a seashell, deep in the sand. Not to hide it, but to leave it. To tell the universe I made it through, and I'm not carrying this anymore. Back at the hotel, I found Andrew on the balcony outside his room. He was holding the photo Liam had given him, gently wiping sand from the corner with his thumb. He looked up as I approached. Can I sit? I asked. He nodded, wordlessly. We sat in silence for a while, listening to the distant hum of traffic, the lull of the waves below. I didn't think I'd get this far, he said finally. What do you mean? Seeing him, talking to you, breathing without shame. I thought I'd spend the rest of my life hiding. You still might, I said, but now you'll do it with someone watching. He smiled faintly. That's fair. I turned toward him. If this is going to work, you need to understand something. Anything. You don't get to drift in and out anymore. No sudden trips. No vague phone calls. If you want to be part of his life, you stay. He looked me in the eyes. I stay. I nodded once. That was all for now. We left San Diego the next morning. Liam held Andrew's hand for a long time in the hotel lobby. When it was time to go, Andrew knelt beside him and whispered something I couldn't hear. Liam nodded, hugged him, tighter than I expected. And then we walked out into the California sun. Just the two of us again. But this time, it felt different. Not because things were fixed, but because the story wasn't frozen anymore. That night, back in Denver, I stood in the kitchen, the same place where the world first fell apart, where I had collapsed on the floor with a death certificate in my hand. Now the counters were clean, the light was warm, the clock ticked peacefully. I pulled out Liam's little wallet from his backpack to slip in his school bus pass. And there it was again, the photo. Us, on the beach, before the storm. Except now, it didn't feel like a relic. It felt like a chapter. One of many. I smiled. For real. 2 weeks after we got back from San Diego, a plain white envelope arrived in the mailbox. No return address, no stamp, even just hand-delivered. Inside, one line. You were never supposed to find him. My fingers tightened around the paper. My throat dried instantly. The handwriting was sharp, rushed, like whoever wrote it was either panicked or angry. At first, I thought it was a prank. Some sick joke. But something about the tone, the precision of it, sent a chill straight down my spine. I stared at the words again. You were never supposed to find him. Who knew? Who still cared enough to warn me, was Andrew still entangled in something darker than he admitted? I looked out the front window. Everything looked normal. Lawnmowers humming down the street. Dogs barking. A neighbor dragging a trash bin to the curb. Denver life, quiet and structured. But suddenly, none of it felt safe. That night, I met Andrew at a diner halfway between his apartment and our house. Liam was at a sleepover. I didn't tell Andrew about the letter until our drinks arrived. He blinked, then set down his coffee slowly. Someone sent that to you. No stamp, no return address, just dropped in my box. I don't know who else even knows you're alive. He looked pale, really pale. I haven't told anyone, he said. Not even Chloe. I raised an eyebrow. She's still around. He hesitated. We ended it. San Diego changed things. I couldn't keep lying to her or to myself. I nodded once. That wasn't the point anymore. Do you think it's from the people you borrowed money from? He exhaled hard, rubbing his temples. They're not the kind of people who forgive even if you repay them. I tied up every loose end I could before I disappeared. But maybe someone didn't like that you came back. He looked at me. You and Liam, are you safe? We're fine, I said. But even I didn't believe it. For days, I kept checking the mailbox, walking Liam to school myself, locking the doors twice. Nothing else came. No second letter, no cars idling outside, no strange calls. Just silence. Too much silence. And then, one morning, Liam came into the kitchen, clutching his wallet. Mom, he said, his face pale. What's wrong? This was in my wallet, he said, handing me a folded slip of paper. I unfolded it slowly. A photo of Andrew, from this month, at the park with Liam. Taken from a distance, scrawled across the back in that same handwriting. Some ghosts should stay dead. My blood ran cold. I called Andrew immediately. He came over within the hour, heart racing. I thought this was over, he whispered. I thought I was free. I paced the living room, fists clenched. This isn't just about you anymore. Someone got close enough to go through Liam's wallet. That was the final line. You need to go to the police, I said. He shook his head. If I go public, everything comes out. The fake death, the falsified documents. I could go to prison. Megan. I stared at him. That might be better than Liam growing up scared. That quieted him. He looked down, ashamed. I'll find another way, he said. And for the first time, I didn't stop him. Because this wasn't about forgiveness anymore. This was about protection. Later that night, I sat with Liam on the couch. He curled up under my arm, watching some animated space movie. I like having him around, he said softly. I know, sweetheart. He looked up. Do you? The question hit deeper than it should have. I like who I've become, I said. And I like that he's trying. That's all I can say right now. Liam nodded, satisfied. Then he added, You smile more when he's here. But you also watch the windows more. Kids notice everything. The next day, Andrew called me from a burner phone. I've got a lead, he said. Old contact. From the mess I ran from. I swallowed. Is it safe? He paused. No, but I'll be careful.
There was a long beat of silence.
Then I asked what I had never dared to before. Would you disappear again? If it meant protecting us. Another pause. I wouldn't want to, but if I had to, I would do it right this time. No lies, no silence, just truth. I closed my eyes. Don't go dark on me, Andrew. I won't, he said, not without saying goodbye. 3 days passed. No word. Then 4. Then 5. On the 6th night, Liam left a note on the fridge, taped under a magnet shaped like a dolphin we got in San Diego. It read, "He'll come back. He promised this time." That night, I lit a candle. For silence, for protection, for clarity. And then, just as quietly as he vanished, he returned. On the 7th day, at dusk, a car pulled up. He stepped out. Alive. In one piece, but different, sharper, older in the eyes. He handed me a flash drive. "What is this?" "Evidence," he said. "If anything happens to me again, this goes to the police. Everything's on there. Names, dates, money trails. It's over." I stared at him. "Are you sure?" He nodded. "I made peace with what I did. Now it's time to make peace with what I didn't do, stay." And for the first time, I believed him. That night, after dinner, Liam fell asleep early. Andrew and I stood in the kitchen, same one where it all began. "I don't know what happens next," I said. He smiled faintly. "Then we build it, one day at a time." I looked at him, steady, calm, then nodded. "Fine, but this time, no more disappearing." He held up both hands. "No more ghosts." I poured us tea. We sat on the porch, and for once, the silence wasn't empty. It was earned. If you're watching this and wondering if second chances are real, yes, but they come with consequences. They come with scars. And sometimes, they show up wearing the same face as the man who left you behind. But they also show up when your son hugs you and whispers, "We're happy now, right, Mom?" And you can finally say, "Yes, baby, we're happy, and we're going to be okay." Tell me in the comments, would you forgive someone who faked their death and came back 3 years later? Or would you shut the door forever? I want to know what you would have done. And don't forget, subscribe for more stories like this. Stories that don't shy away from the messy, the broken, the real. Story 2. My name is Isabel Grant. I'm 34, and I was married to a man I believed would never hurt me. His name is Christopher Blake. We built a company together, shared late-night coffee runs and strategy meetings, whispered promises under the hum of city lights. I believed in us not just as husband and wife, but as partners. Until one night, I came home early from a conference. My flight had landed ahead of schedule. I wanted to surprise him. Instead, he surprised me. I opened the front door to find a pair of red heels, not mine. They were glossy, new, expensive, kicked off like whoever owned them didn't care if they were scuffed. That's when I knew. I stood frozen in the hallway, staring at those shoes like they'd whispered something unspeakable. My chest tightened. My skin felt too tight for my body. I could hear laughter, and then the unmistakable creak of our bed. I wish I could say I kicked the door down like a woman in one of those revenge thrillers. But no, I opened it slowly, quietly. There he was, Christopher, shirtless, smirking, and beside him a woman with red hair that spilled across my pillow like a crime scene. She didn't scream. She didn't apologize. She just stared, smug, daring me to react. Christopher didn't even flinch. He looked irritated, like I had interrupted something important. I turned and walked out. I didn't cry, not yet. I just slammed the door and ran coat half on, heels clicking on the icy sidewalk, heart punching against my ribs like it was trying to escape my body. Snow fell sideways in the wind. I couldn't feel my fingers. Didn't care. I ended up in a corner cafe, one of those quiet places that plays Ella Fitzgerald and serves tea in paper cups. I sat there, shivering, empty. I had no purse, no money. I'd left everything, including my dignity, on the kitchen counter. The barista must have seen something in my face. She handed me a cup and whispered, "It's on the house, honey." That cup of tea might have been the only warmth I had left. When the cafe closed, I wandered. The streets blurred into each other. Lights turned to smears. I couldn't go back to that apartment. Not with him. Not with her. But there was one place I still had a key to. The publishing house. It was ours, at least it used to be. I had worked my way up from intern to editor-in-chief, long before Christopher ever bought his first share. That building had seen my 2 a.m. breakdowns, my proudest headlines, my hardest choices. It was more of a home than the place I just ran from. I unlocked the side door and slipped inside. The office smelled like old ink and ambition. The lights were off, except for the glow from street lamps outside.
I didn't turn anything on. I didn't need to.
I walked past the rows of empty desks. Familiar, safe. Ghosts of late nights drifted behind every swivel chair. Then I heard a voice. "Who's there?"
It was Mike, the night security guard's silver hair, flannel shirt, coffee breath, and kindness. "It's me, Isabel," I called out.
He came into view, squinting. "Miss Grant? You scared me half to death." He took one look at my face, mascara smudged, wind-burned cheeks, red eyes, and stopped asking questions. "You don't have to explain. I'll put on a pot of tea." I smiled. Barely. "Thanks. Mike, I just need a place to exist tonight." "Office still yours," he said. "No matter what happens." He brought me a chipped mug of chamomile and patted my shoulder. I curled up in my office chair, the one with the broken armrest, and my nameplate still screwed into the desk, Isabel Grant, editor-in-chief. I stared at that nameplate for a long time. Was it still true? Was I still that woman? Or had he taken that from me too? My body trembled. My fingertips stung from the cold. But the real pain was inside, the kind that doesn't bleed, doesn't bruise, but carves you from the inside out. My mind wouldn't stop replaying his face. Not guilty, not ashamed, just inconvenienced. That cut deeper than the cheating. That told me I was nothing more than a fixture in his life, a practical asset, an appliance with emotions. He had said it before during arguments, in boardrooms, over dinner. You'd still be editing college journals if it weren't for me. I used to laugh it off. Now, I realized he meant it. Maybe he always had. The tears came quietly. Not a sob, not a scream. Just salt tracks across raw cheeks and the sound of someone trying not to fall apart. And at some point, the tears gave way to sleep. But even in dreams, I couldn't escape him. I heard laughter again, a red blur, the weight of his voice crushing mine. Then came the banging, real this time. I jolted awake, my body stiff, my eyes gritty. The sun filtered through the blinds. And then I heard it, Isabel. "Open the door, now." Christopher's voice. He was here. I froze, heart racing. I could have hidden, could have pretended I wasn't there. But he already knew. I stood, legs shaking. I opened the door. He stepped in like he still owned the building. Expensive coat, perfect hair, no remorse. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he snapped. "You made a scene last night. Why didn't you come home?" My mouth went dry. My jaw locked. But I forced the words out. "I didn't want to interrupt you and your guest." He sneered. So you saw. His shrug said everything. Saves me from having to explain it. Isabel, you and I are done. You've been cold, distant. You care more about deadlines than you do about being a wife. Victoria gets me. She understands.
Victoria, that was her name.
Of course it was. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. My hands curled into fists, fingernails biting skin.
You think you can throw away a marriage and expect a thank you? I asked, barely above a whisper.
He leaned in, voice low and venomous. I carried you, Isabel. Without me, you're nothing. No job, no home, nothing. The word echoed in my skull. Nothing. He turned like he'd won, like he'd delivered the final blow. But he didn't see it, the flicker in my eyes. The beginning of something he couldn't control. Because as he walked away, laughing, I whispered something he didn't hear. Watch me. The next morning, I walked out of the office building into the icy wind like a woman with no destination. Because that's exactly what I was. The life I'd built, or thought I'd built, had collapsed in less than 24 hours. I had no apartment, no husband, and, as of that morning, no job. The receptionist had called to say I was being transitioned out of my editorial role. No explanation. Just a forwarded email from HR with a subject line so sterile, it might as well have been a death certificate. Christopher hadn't even waited a full day. He was cleaning house, starting with me. And the cruelest part, the company still had his name on the letterhead, mine wiped, as if I'd never been there. I wandered the streets in a daze, my boots soaked through, fingers numb. My phone buzzed with messages I didn't want to read. Christopher's name kept flashing on the screen. I didn't answer. What was left to say? At some point, my legs carried me toward the only place that still felt like it belonged to me, my grandmother's house in Carmel by the sea. It had been years since I'd stepped foot there. The salt air, the weathered paint, the creaky porch swing, I hadn't seen any of it since before the wedding. But in that moment, it called to me like an old lullaby. I took a bus, then a train, then a rideshare. I didn't even have a suitcase. Just a duffel bag I'd stuffed with whatever I could grab before Christopher changed the locks. When I arrived, the sky was gray, the Pacific crashed just beyond the cliffs, and the house. It stood exactly as I remembered. Tired, a little sad, but standing.
Like me?
I let myself in with the old skeleton key. The living room smelled like dust and old wood. I wrapped myself in a quilt from the closet and sank into the faded armchair by the window. That's when the tears came again, not from rage, not from shock, but from grief. The quiet kind. The kind that says you're not going back. I cried until my chest stopped shaking, until the tea I made from an expired tin tasted like survival, until the silence of the sea wrapped around me like a funeral song. But the next morning brought something else. Not healing, not clarity, something stranger. I heard it before I saw him, a muffled groan, something low and human, carried by the wind. I rushed outside, barefoot on the cold porch, and saw a figure crumpled in the snow near the footpath. My heart dropped. It was a man, thin coat, blue lips, trembling. Sasha, I breathed. I hadn't said his name in years. He'd been my neighbor growing up, a sweet, awkward boy who used to leave folded poems in my locker. Life had not been kind to him. Now he lay half buried in snow, mumbling something about no one caring. I care, I whispered, dragging him toward the porch, my muscles screaming from the weight. Inside, I wrapped him in blankets, lit a fire, made him tea with the last of the honey. He sipped it like it hurt to swallow, then looked up at me with those same tired, soft eyes. Didn't think anyone would stop, he said. I didn't answer, I couldn't. My throat was tight again, but not from sadness, from something heavier. Guilt. Because I had stopped, and it reminded me that I wasn't powerless, That kindness still lived in me, no matter what Christopher tried to erase. But as night fell, the adrenaline crashed. My hands began to tingle a strange, burning sensation I couldn't ignore. By 8 p.m., I couldn't hold a cup without spilling it. By 10 p.m., I collapsed. The next time I opened my eyes, the light was soft. The room smelled faintly of cedar and citrus. I was on the couch, wrapped in layers, and beside the window, a man sat quietly scrolling through his phone.
Not Sasha, someone else.
He turned when I stirred. "You're awake," he said. His voice was calm, assured. It was him, Alexander Shaw. I'd met him only once, months ago, at a publishing gala. He was tall, quiet, observant, one of those men who made people lean in without saying much.
What was he doing here?
I tried to sit up, but the dizziness came fast. "Easy," he said, moving to my side. "You're okay. Just exhausted." My mouth was dry. My lips cracked.
How?
He gave a faint smile. "You warned me once about my car." I blinked. It came rushing back the street. My panic. The vivid image of a black sedan in flames.
"I told you not to drive it," I murmured. "You did, and you were right."
He explained that the engine had seized. The mechanic said it could have caught fire on the highway. He hadn't driven it, because of me. "So, I figured," he added. "I owed you at least a check-in." He glanced around the room. "Didn't expect to find you unconscious in your own living room." I tried to laugh, but it came out like a croak. "You need medical care," he said gently. "I'm fine." I lied. The words felt thin, weak. He didn't argue. He just pulled out his phone. 15 minutes later, I was in the back seat of his car, wrapped in a throw blanket, head spinning. At the clinic, they treated me for fever and mild frostbite. The doctor said stress had weakened my immune system. They kept me overnight. Alexander never left the waiting room. I watched him through the door elbows on his knees, brow furrowed. He didn't pace, didn't tap his phone like he had better things to do. He just waited. In the morning, I tried to sit up. My hands were wrapped in gauze. "Your fingers will recover," the doctor said. "But no heavy lifting for a while. You'll need rest and support." Support. The one thing I didn't have anymore. Alexander helped me into my coat. His hands were warm, gentle. He didn't flinch at my bandages. "You didn't have to stay," I whispered. "I did," he said. "You saved me. I'm just returning the favor." Back at the house, he carried a grocery bag to the kitchen. "Basics," he said. "Food, tea, real tea this time." I smiled, weak but real. And then he pulled out a folder. "I read your work last night," he said. "You're talented, Isabel. You've got an instinct. I run a creative division at Shaw Media. I need someone with your voice." I stared at the folder. My throat burned again, but not from fever this time. "After everything?" I whispered. "Why?" He looked at me. "Because someone once told me I was nothing, and someone else proved them wrong. You deserve the same chance." I held the folder like it might vanish, like it couldn't be real. Because 2 nights ago, I was just a woman crying in her old house, abandoned, erased. Now, I was being offered a new page. But I wasn't ready. Not yet. "I don't know if I can," I said. He nodded. "That's okay. You don't have to say yes today." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "But Isabel, if you want to rebuild, I'll make sure you have the space to do it." Then he was gone, and I was left with a choice. The next few days passed in slow motion, like someone had hit pause on the rest of the world and left me standing there with nothing but a teacup and a second chance I didn't know what to do with. I stayed at my grandmother's house, trying to heal. My hands were still wrapped in gauze, aching with every movement. My body was weak, but my mind was louder than ever. I kept staring at that folder Alexander had left behind. His offer, a real position, at a media empire, with resources, reach, and most dangerously of all, respect. The part of me that still believed in the old rules, the loyal wife who put her husband's vision first, kept whispering, "You're not ready. You're broken. You've lost everything." But the other part, the one he tried to erase, she was starting to whisper back, "Maybe broken women can still build things." One morning, I dug into the back of the closet and found it my grandmother's old typewriter, rusted ribbon, chipped paint, keys that stuck. She used to write letters to the editor with it, passionate, biting words that made people pay attention. That machine had once given her a voice in a time when women were expected to sit down and smile. I ran my fingers over the keys. Even wrapped in gauze, I knew. This was my start line. So I wrote. I didn't open a Word doc or a pitch deck. I didn't plan metrics or market share. I just wrote a personal essay, one I never meant to publish. I titled it "The Day I Disappeared." It wasn't about Christopher, not directly. It was about the moment I realized I had let myself become invisible, quiet, useful, non-threatening. How easy it is to disappear when the people around you benefit from your silence. It was raw and jagged and angry and honest. I sent it to no one. But I kept it, because writing it reminded me of something vital. My voice didn't belong to him. It never had. A week later, Alexander showed up again. This time, he brought a coat, better groceries, and a car service. "I'm not trying to pressure you," he said, "but we're setting up the new creative office, and it would help to have you nearby. Just consider it." I hesitated. Again. Leaving Carmel meant letting go of the last place untouched by his betrayal. But staying meant hiding. And I wasn't that woman anymore. "I'll come," I said, "but not as a favor." He smiled. Good. I wasn't offering charity. Alexander's estate sat on a cliff outside Santa Cruz, a modern glass-walled home that somehow managed to feel peaceful instead of pretentious. The kind of place that could either be a prison or a sanctuary depending on who you were walking in as. He gave me the East Wing, my own space, a writing nook, a balcony overlooking the sea. I expected it to feel too big, too cold, but it didn't. Until I saw her. Victoria. Red-haired, smirking, wearing a silk robe like she belonged there. "Oh," she said when our eyes met, "you must be the broken wife." I didn't flinch, not anymore. "And you must be the visitor with no expiration date," I replied evenly. She gave me a look that could have sliced granite. "You two know each other?" Alexander asked, stepping in behind me. "We've met," I said simply. "Quite intimately," Victoria added, sipping wine at 10 in the morning. Alexander glanced between us. "Victoria, can I speak to you in private?" They left the room. The walls didn't carry sound, but I didn't need to hear the words. I could feel the tension shift. A few minutes later, she walked out, her face tight, her heels loud. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the balcony, breathing in the ocean air like it was the only thing keeping me from breaking again. Alexander joined me, silent at first. Then he said, "If I had known that she was the one in your apartment." I shook my head. "You didn't, but now you do." He turned to me. "You don't have to stay. I can relocate the team, the house, everything." "I'm not running anymore," I said. "Not from her, not from any of it." Over the next week, we started building something real. The creative division at Shaw Media wasn't just a vanity project. It was a chance to shift focus to tell stories that mattered, from voices that were often overlooked. Alexander gave me full editorial control. I hired a team of hungry, passionate writers, young women, queer voices, first-gen Americans, people who knew what it meant to fight to be heard. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was climbing someone else's ladder. I was building my own. But Victoria wasn't done. She lingered. Always in the background, always watching. She dropped barbs at dinner, left perfume on doorknobs, told casual stories about Christopher as if trying to remind me I was secondhand. I didn't rise to it. I learned. And then I caught her. One afternoon, I walked into Alexander's office to find her at his desk, going through his files. She jumped when she saw me. "You shouldn't be in here," I said. "I could say the same," she snapped. "You're not on staff. Neither were you. You just slept your way in faster." I didn't move, didn't blink. "I know women like you," she sneered. "You think your little sob story is going to make you bulletproof? Let me tell you something, Isabel. People like you never win. You break everything you touch." Something flickered inside me, a rage, but it wasn't loud. It was quiet, solid. I thought of the night I saved Sasha, the words I wrote on that typewriter, the way Alexander looked at me when he said, "You saved me." "No," I said, "that's your story, not mine." And I walked out. That evening, Alexander found me sitting in the library. "What happened?" he asked. She tried to rattle me. "Did it work?" I smiled faintly, not even a crack. He gave me a long look, one filled with something almost like admiration. "You're stronger than you think." And for the first time in a very long time, I believed it. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was watching the ground I used to walk on turn solid again. I used to believe that rock bottom was a place you crashed into, hard and fast, with no warning. But I was wrong. Rock bottom can be quiet, polite. It can hand you a glass of wine and say, "Stay a while." That's what it felt like with Victoria still in the house. Even after I'd caught her snooping through Alexander's files, she acted like nothing had happened, like I hadn't seen her with my husband, like she wasn't the poison bleeding into every corner of this place. But I didn't react, not publicly. I'd learned. You don't set fire to a nest of snakes. You wait for them to eat each other. And Victoria. She was already starting to unravel. Missed meetings, slurred words. That razor-edge confidence was slipping into something brittle. I didn't tell Alexander. I didn't need to. Because she was about to tell on herself. It started with a line item in the finance logs. We were reviewing quarterly budgets for the new editorial division when I spotted it a $14,000 expense labeled consulting services. But no name, no invoice. Just a string of vague numbers tied to a slush fund. I flagged it for Alexander. He frowned. "That's not a division expense." He made a call. 10 minutes later, he had the bank records. 30 minutes after that, he had the falsified invoice, forged signature, Victoria's. He didn't explode. He didn't even raise his voice. He just looked at me and said, "Would you mind being in the room when I talk to her?" I nodded. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I needed to watch the truth take its rightful shape. When Victoria entered the study, she was wearing all white as if innocence could be manufactured by fabric. Alexander gestured to the chair across from him. She sat, crossed her legs. "What is this about?" she asked, smiling like a woman who'd never been cornered before. He placed the documents on the table. The room was silent. Her smile faltered for half a second. Then the lies began. "I didn't authorize that payment. Someone must have used my credentials. I'm being framed." But Alexander didn't flinch. He didn't give her a single inch to wriggle out of. "Pack your things," he said. Her face froze. "You're done here." She laughed sharp and shrill. "You're choosing her over me," she spat, pointing at me. "This isn't about Isabel," he said coldly. "This is about you breaking every rule of trust I gave you." She stood. "And what about what she's done? She's a liar. She plays victim. She lets men fix her life while pretending she's empowered. It's pathetic. The words hit like glass, but they didn't cut. Because they weren't true anymore. I didn't even blink. Alexander stood, slowly. "If you don't leave now," he said, "I'll make this public, and you'll never work in media again." Victoria went silent. For a moment, I thought she might cry. But she didn't. She simply straightened her shoulders, gathered her bag, and left heels echoing like gunshots down the marble hallway. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel smug. I just felt free. Like someone had opened a window in a room I didn't realize was suffocating me. Later that evening, I sat on the balcony with a mug of mint tea. The sky was bruised with dusk. The sea below crashed like a heartbeat. Alexander joined me in silence. He handed me a folder. I raised an eyebrow. Another scandal. He chuckled. Not this time. Inside were drafts, concept pitches, brand proposals, mock-ups for the editorial site we'd been building. At the top of every page, the rising current. "I wanted you to name it," he said, "but this felt right." I ran my fingers over the cover. The rising current. Stories that push against silence. That question power. That refuse to stay still. I nodded. "It's perfect." The next day, something unexpected happened. My essay, "The Day I Disappeared," the one I'd written for no one to read, it found its way online. Sasha had submitted it. He'd found it in my typewriter, read it when I was asleep, and somehow he knew it mattered. The post went viral within 24 hours. Thousands of comments. Women, men, people who'd been invisible, who'd been told they were too much, or not enough, or nothing at all. The response was overwhelming, messy, beautiful, but one message stopped me cold. It was from a former colleague, someone I'd mentored years ago. She wrote, "You were the only person who ever said my voice mattered. Now you're saying it to the world. Thank you." I read it twice, then 3 times. Because that was the moment I knew. This wasn't just about me anymore. But while one fire burned out, another was just starting. News broke 2 days later. Christopher Blake, co-founder of our old publishing firm, was under investigation. Shell companies, false contracts, misappropriated funds. The same tactics he once mocked me for flagging in meetings were now coming back to destroy him. His name trended on every major platform. And for the first time, it wasn't for awards or features. It was for fraud. Alexander came into my office that morning. "You've seen it." I nodded. All of it. He studied me.
Do you want to comment publicly?
I shook my head. Some endings don't need applause. They just need closure. He nodded, like he understood more than he let on. That night, I sat at the typewriter again. The same ribbon, the same keys. But I wasn't writing pain this time. I was writing power. The power of a woman who stopped asking for space and started taking it. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building. I was leading. And for the first time in my life, I was the architect of my own name. Later, as I walked into the kitchen, I saw Alexander at the stove. He looked up. "I made dinner," he said, almost sheepishly. "You cook," I teased. "Only when the pressure's high and the wine's open." We laughed. And then, silence. A warm, safe, kind silence. He looked at me, eyes steady. "You saved more than my life. You know." I tilted my head. "What do you mean?" "You reminded me that people, real people, are worth building for." We stood there for a moment. Not lovers. Not partners. Just 2 people who had chosen not to stay broken. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. When people talk about revenge, they usually picture fire, dramatic, loud, irreversible. But I've learned the sharpest kind of revenge isn't fire, it's water. It moves slowly, silently, soft at first, then suddenly unstoppable. That was the energy in the house now. Quiet, focused, deliberate. After Victoria was gone, everything sharpened. Our launch date for The Rising Current was set. Final edits were locked in. The social rollout plan was done. Interviews, previews, partnerships all ready. But one thing was still unfinished: my voice. I had written one personal essay. It had struck a nerve. People were still sharing it weeks later. But I hadn't spoken. Not publicly, not in my own voice. Alexander didn't pressure me. He just asked a single question one evening over dinner. What would you say to the girl who walked into that apartment and saw the red heels? I stared at my plate. And then I realized I knew exactly what I'd say. The next morning, I asked for time in the recording studio we'd set up for podcast pilots.
Just me? One mic? One glass of water? No script?
I sat in front of the condenser mic, heart pounding, hands still stiff but steady. Then I said, "Hi, I'm Isabel Grant, and 3 months ago, I disappeared, not from the world, exactly, but from myself."
I didn't name Christopher. I didn't have to.
But I told the story. Not the tabloid version, not the clickbait version. Mine. I told them about the shoes, the silence, the way contempt can hurt more than infidelity. I told them about the night in the cafe, the first free cup of tea, the office chair I cried into, the house by the sea, Sasha, my broken hands, the essay no one was supposed to read. Then I said something I hadn't planned. I used to think being invisible was safety, that if I kept my head down, worked hard, proved my worth, no one could take it from me. But here's the thing about people who want to erase you: they don't wait until you're loud to strike. They strike when you're quiet, when you're useful, when you say yes too much. I paused. Let the silence breathe. Then I said, "So I'm done being quiet, and if any part of you has ever been made to feel invisible, this space is yours too."
That was it. 30 minutes. Raw. Unfiltered. Done in one take.
When I left the booth, I felt something I hadn't felt in years complete. The podcast episode launched 2 days before the editorial site. Within hours, it was trending. The numbers didn't even matter. It was the comments, the messages, the flood of stories from strangers who didn't feel like strangers anymore. Women writing from small towns in Ohio, immigrant moms in Queens, middle-aged journalists who had been pushed out of boardrooms, even teenagers, girls who said no one had ever put their feelings into words before. I didn't cry this time. I absorbed it. And I understood now. I hadn't rebuilt a career. I'd reclaimed presence. But just as everything began to settle, the past came clawing back. It started with a letter.
Official? Cold? Certified?
From Christopher's lawyer. It accused me of defamation by implication, not because I'd said his name, but because any reasonable person could infer his identity from context. It was classic. A man who had publicly dismantled our marriage, now trying to silence me through legal intimidation. I brought the letter to Alexander. He read it, folded it once, set it down. "You don't have to fight this alone," he said. I shook my head. "I'm not afraid, but I don't want a courtroom circus. He wants a public fight so he can twist the story." "Then what's the play?" I took a breath. "We give him exactly what he doesn't expect." Over the next 48 hours, I put together my next move. I didn't file a countersuit. I didn't go to the media. Instead, I called in a quiet favor a contact at the Financial Ethics Review Board, an old acquaintance who had respected my work, and more importantly, my silence when I left the company. I sent over everything I'd saved: internal memos, meeting minutes, red-flagged contracts he once told me to delete. I didn't even have to dig for them. Because back then, I kept a copy of everything not out of suspicion, but because I knew how often women got blamed when things fell apart. Let's just say, the ethics board was very interested.
And suddenly, the news cycle shifted.
The focus wasn't on a messy ex-marriage anymore. It was on Christopher Blake, media golden boy, and the growing case of long-term financial misconduct. His resignation was forced. Investors pulled out. His publicist quit.
And I
said nothing. Silence can be a weapon, too. And this time, it was mine. That Friday, I came back to Carmel for a weekend. I needed air. The salt, the quiet, the creaky porch. It wasn't about escaping anymore. It was about remembering where the new me was born. I sat on the balcony that night, wrapped in a sweater, holding the same chipped mug from months ago. And just like before, Alexander showed up beside me. No big speech, no agenda. Just presence. After a while, he said, "You know, most people think power is about volume." I smirked. They've clearly never met a woman who decided she's done being erased. He laughed, soft, warm, like someone breathing for the first time in a while. Then he set a manila envelope beside me.
"What's the?" "Something I've been working on," he said. "You don't have to say yes, but I'd like you to read it."
Inside was a partnership contract. Equal stake in the rising current. Creative and strategic control together. I looked at him, stunned.
"You want me to co-lead this?"
"I want you to own what you've already built," he said. "Not as a favor, not as gratitude, as equity." My eyes burned, but not from sadness. From the overwhelming, bone-deep feeling of being seen. We sat in silence again. But it was the good kind. Then, just as I was about to speak, a notification buzzed on my phone. It was an email. From someone I hadn't heard from in months. Victoria. The subject line, "You think it's over." I clicked it open. One sentence. "Let's see how well you handle secrets when they're not yours." My stomach turned.
Alexander leaned in. "What is it?"
I handed him the phone.
He read it, went still.
What could she possibly? Before he could finish, my screen lit up again. One new file received Shaw Media Internal 2020 zip. The file sat unopened on my screen. Shaw Media Internal 2020 zip. No subject, no context, just that single, ominous sentence from Victoria. "Let's see how well you handle secrets when they're not yours." I stared at it, heart pounding, my hands suddenly cold. Alexander was next to me, his expression unreadable, a tight set to his jaw. His eyes scanning the screen like he was already bracing for impact. "You don't have to open it," he said quietly, but we both knew I would. I clicked. Inside were dozens of files, emails, memos, flagged payments, HR complaints, internal audit reports, names I recognized, names that were supposed to be clean. I opened the first PDF and skimmed. It hit hard. Shaw Media's former executive team, before Alexander had taken full control, had buried a harassment complaint against a now famous anchor in exchange for a licensing deal that brought in millions. And Alexander's name was CC'd on one of the threads. My stomach twisted. I looked up at him. "I never saw that thread," he said immediately. "They kept me out of compliance conversations. I was still a silent partner back then." I believed him, or I wanted to. But belief wasn't enough now, not after everything I had rebuilt from the ground up. I stood. I needed air. He followed me to the balcony. "I know how this looks," he began. "It's not just how it looks." I cut in. "It's what it is. This file isn't gossip. It's evidence." He stayed quiet. I gripped the railing, the ocean roaring in the distance like a judgment I couldn't tune out. "I created this platform to tell the truth, Alexander," I said, "to give voice to people who were erased. If I sit on this, I become everything I walked away from." He nodded, slowly.
"You're right."
That scared me more than if he'd denied it. He stepped closer, You do what you have to do, even if that means publishing it. I turned to him. Do you understand what that means? You'll be implicated even if you were just copied. I'd rather be burned by truth than protected by silence, he said. That's why I asked you to lead it. Because I knew you'd never choose me over your principles.
I held his gaze, searching.
I didn't see fear. I saw surrender, the kind that comes from finally letting go of the lie that power means control. It meant accountability. And now it was mine. I spent the next 24 hours verifying every document, cross-checking dates, confirming sources, reaching out quietly to 2 former employees mentioned in the complaints. One of them cried when I told her I had the files. She said, "I've been screaming into a void for years. Thank you for hearing me." The next day, I called an emergency editorial meeting. The team gathered around the long wooden table, the one we'd picked for its warmth, its lack of pretense. No one wore suits. No one hid behind titles.
I have something to show you, I said, voice steady. And I need your vote.
I laid out the file, the connections, the risk. We built the Rising Current to be the platform that tells the stories other outlets bury. I said, this is one of them. And yes, it could hurt us. But if we flinch now, we were never real to begin with. Silence. Then a voice from across the table, Jenna, one of our youngest producers. If we don't publish it, she said, then they still win. One by one, heads nodded. Eyes met mine with something I hadn't felt in years. Not admiration, not even loyalty. Trust? The exposé dropped the next morning. The headline was direct. Buried voices. What Shaw Media chose not to hear. We didn't mention Alexander by name, but the timeline was clear. The oversight was visible. Within an hour, news outlets picked it up. By noon, our servers slowed under traffic. By evening, networks were demanding statements. And then the first domino fell. The former executive in question issued a public apology. 2 anchors went on leave. An internal investigation was launched. And Alexander. He held a press conference. No lawyers, no PR spin. Just him standing in front of the Shaw Media logo, saying, I didn't know, but I should have. That's on me. It wasn't performative. It was exact, clean, real. He didn't try to distance himself. He used his platform to reinforce ours. When asked if he regretted giving me editorial control, he said, I regret not doing it sooner. The reporter blinked, then asked, What about your relationship with Isabel Grant? He smiled, the first smile I'd seen in days. She doesn't belong to me, he said, but I hope I still belong to her story. Back at the estate, I watched the replay of his speech from the library. My heart was both heavy and full, like I was holding 2 truths in the same hand. Love and disappointment, admiration and hurt. I turned toward the window, toward the same sea I'd once fled to. And I realized, you don't rebuild trust by being perfect. You rebuild it by standing still while it burns and saying, I'm here. I'm staying. That night, Alexander and I didn't talk much. We sat on the balcony, shoulder to shoulder.
No declarations, no apologies.
Just 2 people watching the waves, wondering what the next tide might carry in. A few days later, I returned to my typewriter. The keys still stuck on Q and E, the ribbons still faint in places. But it worked. And I wrote, Truth is not a weapon you point outward. It's a weight you choose to carry even when your arms are tired, even when no one claps. The piece wasn't angry. It wasn't defensive. It was about what it costs to hold power ethically in a world that rewards shortcuts. When I finished, I left the paper on my desk. Not to submit, not to post. Just to remember who I was. In case I ever forgot again. 2 weeks later, I got an envelope in the mail. No return address, just a small wax seal. Inside was a single sentence, typed on thin paper. You stood in fire and didn't scream. Let's see if you stand when the smoke clears.
No signature.
No name. But I knew exactly who it was from.
Victoria wasn't finished. The envelope sat on my desk for days. No return address. Just a single sentence pressed into the paper. Like a whisper in the dark. You stood in fire and didn't scream. Let's see if you stand when the smoke clears.
Victoria's shadow lingered, long and cold. But this time, I wasn't afraid. Because I'd learned something vital. Survival isn't just about enduring the flames. It's about choosing what to become after the fire. That morning, I woke early. The ocean breeze slipped through the open balcony door. Cool and steady, a reminder that some things are constant, no matter the storm. I dressed slowly, fingers still stiff but growing stronger. The old typewriter sat waiting, silent but patient. I tapped a key, then another, letting the rhythm ground me. The truth was simple. I was no longer the woman who hid in the shadows. I was someone who had rebuilt her life piece by piece on her own terms. And that meant more than a new job, a new home, or even a new love. It meant reclaiming my story. Alexander joined me on the balcony just as the sun painted the sky gold. "Ready for the launch?" he asked. I nodded, swallowing a lump of nerves and excitement. The world's watching. He smiled, the kind of smile that promises partnership, not possession. "We've come a long way." I looked out over the waves, feeling the weight of every choice I'd made, the betrayals, the risks, the moments I almost gave up. "Longer than I ever expected," I said. The launch of the Rising Current was more than a project. It was a declaration. We featured stories from people who had been silenced, overlooked, erased, a platform where their voices weren't just heard, but amplified. And the response was electric. Listeners and readers poured in. Messages flooded our inboxes. People found courage in each other's stories. The platform became a movement. For the first time, I felt connected to something bigger than myself. But power isn't given, it's taken. Victoria's final attempt had failed, but the scars remained. Some old allies of Christopher tried to discredit the platform, spreading rumors. Others whispered about my age, my lack of experience for such a leadership role. Some doubted a woman who had been knocked down could truly lead. It was a harsh reminder that in America, the dream is still tangled with prejudice, ageism, sexism, class divisions. Yet, every whisper only fueled my resolve. Because my story was not about perfection, it was about persistence. One afternoon, I found myself back in the old office building, the place where I had first fallen apart. The sun streamed through the windows, dust motes dancing like tiny ghosts. I walked to my old desk, fingers brushing the cold surface. There, tucked under the keyboard, was a worn piece of paper, a draft from the early days. My grandmother's handwriting, faded but fierce. "Write the truth. Isabel, the world will try to silence you. Don't let it." I held the paper close, feeling the past and future intertwine. That evening, Alexander and I sat on the balcony again. No need for words. The ocean whispered below, endless and certain. His hand found mine. No promises, no conditions. Just a shared understanding. We had survived fire and smoke, and now we stood together stronger, unbroken. Before I turned in, I took the typewriter's last sheet. I typed slowly, each word a declaration. Betrayal shatters what you think you are, but healing builds what you choose to become. And sometimes, rising from ashes isn't just survival, it's revolution. I pressed the paper out, watching it slip into the tray. For once, I felt ready to tell the world. This is my story, and it's only just beginning. If you've ever been told you're nothing, or felt invisible in your own life, remember this: Your story is yours to write. Don't let anyone else hold the pen. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Drop your thoughts below and hit subscribe to follow the rest of the journey. Because sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is start again. Thank you for watching. See you in the next story.